What makes a great crime drama?
When I first started writing crime dramas, I asked myself the same question, what makes a great crime drama? And I couldn't find a lot of resources, so I started binging, watching to find out, what makes for a good crime drama? What are the ingredients? Because I'm I love to cook, I love to bake, so I think in terms of ingredients. So I came up with this formula, this recipe. I think basically I'll give you the ingredients. How we put them together, I think, is what really makes, a souffle better than another souffle. But I think, first of all, you start with this thing called what I call mom and pop. So, like the foundation of every good family is a mother and a father. Mom and pop points of proof are what law enforcement start with when they're investigating a case. And the points of proof are mom, means, opportunity, and motive. So really thinking through those three things, whenever I start to write a new or develop a new crime drama, I kind of pretend like I'm making the case file for my story and my crime. And I start with the way a detective would. So what were the means, opportunity, and motive of my criminal? And I do a pretty deep dive into that. I'm not talking just like one word, but like I really go deep into what was the crime and especially why was it committed. And then of course you have things like you have to have crime, you have to know the crimes. There's usually more than one crime that happens. So like what is your series of crimes? How does that build? There's always then there's like obstacles, and these are really just story elements as well, but there have to be specific obstacles at certain points along the way that relate to how the criminal and the protagonist, kind of do the cat and mouse game. I think too I believe, and I think this is probably the most important ingredient, I believe that the source or the foundation of every great crime story is rooted in love. And it could be a familial love, like a parent-child or two brothers. It could be romantic love. It could be just an agape, like a friendship, platonic kind of love. It could even be maybe a self-love, a person who's trying to forgive themselves for something or come more into themselves, become more a better person, or the best version of themselves. But there's always, I think, when you look at every great crime story, it's always rooted in love. Look at Breaking Bad. It starts because Walter White wants to take care of his family. It's familial love. That's the entire basis of whatever the whole thing, why he does what he does. Prisoners. I don't know if you ever saw Prisoners. It's a film by Alcon Entertainment, Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal. That is also familial love. Everything that Hugh Jackman does to try to solve this crime is completely based in love for his daughter. Anyway, Monk, the TV show Monk. He comes back to the force because he wants to avenge his wife's death. His wife was murdered, and he wants to wants to solve that case because of his love for her. So I think once you nail that, once you figure that out with your protagonist, that to me is sort of the basis of a really great crime story. And then you add all the other stuff, your case file, your obstacles, your crimes, your motive, means, opportunity. I think you need to pepper in some of there's story tropes for crime genre that you just sort of have to put in there, like maybe something blows up, a bad guy turns good or a good guy turns bad. There's always at the end of Act 2, always you need to put your hero's life in danger. The protagonist who's trying to catch this criminal almost dies, right? That whiff of death moment. And I think you need a little bit of gallows humor. I think that's kind of like a little salt and pepper that you need to put into it. And then, of course, character. I think that all these great crime stories, or like when you look at any of the Hitchcock stories, they have amazing protagonists. And even the ones of modern, the protagonists are really Dexter, Walter White. They're all very, very layered characters. And so I go through like a whole exercise to help myself really layer who is this, not just a detective or an investigator. It's like there's got to be a lot more to this character than they just want to solve crimes. Like, why are they solving? Why are they doing this? You know, why did they pick this thing to do versus another thing to do? So character, of course, is key.
What kinds of characters do we most often see in crime dramas?
Any kinds of characters. Any kinds of characters are in crime dramas. And that's because I think you have, when I teach on this, I teach on 11 crime story types, and I kind of go through, again, when I was binge watching years ago, all these crime stories, I started to notice, oh, they all kind of fall into like certain story types. Like there's the traditional cop, there's the forensic specialist, there's the profiler, there's the caper, you know, there's all these 11. And so what I realized in doing that is like literally anybody can be an investigator. You have a whole like amateur detective, amateur sleuth category. So it could be a plumber, it could be a librarian, you know, girl with a dragon tattoo. She's not a professional law enforcement. She's a computer hacker. Murder, She Wrote, right? Just a writer, just you know, in a small town. So really, the protagonist can be anybody. Walter White was a high school teacher, right? So I think that's what's so great. And then like if you get into like supernatural crime stories, like Supernatural, I think they were brothers, if I remember right. I haven't seen it for a while, but they can be anybody. You have like the X-Files. It's really kind of Stranger Things. It's a bunch of kids, but they are solving a crime. They are solving a supernatural crime that's going on in their community. So really can be anybody, which is why I think this genre is so widely appealing. Like, there's really something for everybody.
What's usually at stake?
Yeah. What's always at stake? You know how, you know, again, as writers, we're like, okay, what does the character want? What does the character need? And it's like these two storylines always flowing together. The external goal and then the internal goal. So the external goal is 99.9% of the time to catch the killer, to solve the case. That's what the protagonist wants. They want to, you know, restore the world to justice, redeem that world, order the chaos, right? The internal drive is always the same. It's always the same overall goal. It's just different depending on who that character is. And this is why I think that these grab people so much. Well, any great story will grab people. The internal goal for any protagonist, or the internal need, I should say, is if they don't get that thing, if they don't solve that case or get that thing that they're after, because of whatever's going on inside, they will lose their soul. They will absolutely lose their soul. I always like to say, there are worse things than death. Death is not the worst thing that can happen to us. Losing our soul is the worst thing that can happen to us. And I think that's why when you find these really great stories, whether they're end up being, you know, heroic stories or more tragic stories, again, back to Breaking Bad, the thing that Walter White's going to lose if he doesn't provide for his family is his soul. He will have lost a lot of other things, but at the core of himself, he would have failed completely lose his soul if he doesn't, you know, step up and do this. So that's what I think is always at stake.
So there has to be a core of obsession in the character that's trying to solve the crime, whoever that is, whether it's like an actual detective or a citizen journalist or somebody. There's like this, they just, like their whole life will fall apart if they don't. Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, let's look at I always want to say sharper objects.
That's a good one. That's the second one, yeah.
Right, exactly. And then sharpest.
Yeah, there you go, third one, yeah, trilogy.
So in Sharp Objects, so let's look at, and I forget I'm so bad with names, but Amy Adams, like her character, you know, she's coming back to this small town to really unravel this horrific event that happened, and she's also struggling, right, herself. She's basically an alcoholic, if I'm remembering that correctly. And so she knows, I think we see in her that she knows if she can't get out of this cycle of alcoholism, she's going to lose herself. She's going to lose her soul. The only way out of that is she's got to uncover all this stuff that's been going on back home that she tried to run away from. So if she never, ever, ever in her entire life solves that, she'll never become whole. She'll lose her soul.
Right, and it's a great opening too because it hints at some of the stuff that she went through, and then she presents to her editor, or I forget how it goes down, whether he presents to her or she presents to him, and she goes back, and it's so wonderful. It is on so many levels.
And he's that mentor, like constantly challenging her, right? Because he knows she's going to lose her soul if she doesn't press forward, and it does become an obsession for her because there's a certain point at which she's kind of sort of a reluctant hero at points, or you see her wanting to pull back, but then there's a point where she goes full in and it does become more of an obsession because she does realize if she does, for many, I mean, there's the external, like I've got to do this for everyone around me too and save them, but if I don't do it, I'm going to be lost forever. My whole being is lost. So it does become an obsession.
Sure, and it also, too, it has a lot of baggage for her to go back because, if I'm remembering correctly, she grew up in Wind Gap. And so she kind of has, bitter feelings, but also some memories that were bad and some that were, it was her whole being that was back there.
Exactly, and she has to go back and face that and then redeem it. Right. She has to redeem it somehow.